Hello everyone, I'm Nicholas Reid from Reid Corporate, and on behalf of Greenvale Energy, ASX ticker GRV, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this Resources Rising Stars investor webinar. Thanks very much for your time. I'm joined today by Greenvale's new Chief Executive Officer, Alex Cheeseman, who will provide us with an update on some of the exciting recent and upcoming developments across Greenvale's Australian uranium portfolio. Now, as many of you know, Greenvale's chairman, Neil Biddle, well known to many in the RRS community, has outlined a clear long-term vision to build a significant uranium company at Greenvale, positioning the company to participate in what he sees as one of the major emerging market thematics of the coming decade. Global demand for uranium is being driven by the need for zero-emission baseload energy, underpinned by the world's surging appetite for power, particularly as the AI revolution accelerates. Today, Alex is going to share how Greenvale plans to advance its uranium strategy while also unlocking the significant latent value of its alpha taurbanite project in Queensland. Before we begin, a quick reminder that this webinar is intended to be an interactive session. So please use the Q&A tab on your screen to submit any questions throughout the session. I'm going to be jumping in and asking Alex a few as we go, but we'll make sure that we cover off any issues that you'd like to raise. So, Alex, great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning, and let's get into it. Please run us through where Greenvale's up to.
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas, and great intro. I think you've stolen most of the things I was going to talk about in terms of the market dynamics and what Neil's strategy is. I'll go over it again anyway, but and I think I'll probably just echo your point there around the interaction and question asking. I mean, this to me is the perfect opportunity in this sort of forum for people to reach out and ask questions. So, I mean, as they come through you, please just jump in and fire away. I'm happy to break up the presentation as we go to make sure we cover off on the things that, our shareholders and interested parties want to know about. In terms of corporate overview, I mean, again, this slide was presented relatively recently, or a version of it at the RRS Gold Coast conference, and not much has changed since then. Our top 20, including the board, account for almost half of the stock on issue. If we expand that to the top 40, we're really covering about 60% of the register. So the shares are pretty tightly held. And I mean, the positive thing there, we can see some really rapid share price movements off good news. We have a very experienced team, and as I said, the board are very heavily aligned with shareholders. A clear strategy to invest and build in resource base. The company, as you mentioned, we do have fairly diversified assets and commodities. I think that's really important to keep that broad mix of commodity exposure as an exploration company. Just helps us leverage against, what we've seen in the last few years of very kind of volatile, hyper volatile markets. But all of our projects really are aligned to that theme of sort of a clean future energy requirement. Our uranium-focused exploration, again, a relatively new move for the company, but very deliberate to start pushing uranium assets into the company. And this is, as I said, where our exploration effort is focused. The Alpha project, which I'll talk to shortly, we have an existing resource there, a substantial resource that could be, mined into the future. We don't need to explore more there, but we do need a reason to get up every day, chase new ground, look for projects, try to make discoveries, and we're putting all that effort into uranium right now. I think since the end of June, and it's probably a good point to note that since the end of June, when we started preparing for our drilling at Oasis and then rolled straight into the program, we have seen very positive share price response. We sort of went from around 3 cents to sitting pretty steady today at kind of mid 5.4, 5.5 cents. I think that's a really great endorsement of this uranium exploration strategy.
I might just quickly jump in there, Alex. So you've been with the company for about 4 months, and no doubt you've got to know Neil pretty well in that time. What's his view of how the uranium space is evolving at the moment, and also what you've seen sort of early days at Oasis?
Yeah, look, it's a good point to raise. Neil is very excited, and one of the things that I have to do quite regularly is temper his expectations and his excitement. He just wants to go at a bull at a gate. So he's very strong on uranium. I mean, obviously, it was his push to start putting the uranium assets into the company well before I started. At Oasis, given the results that we've had, just from our very first 2 drill hits in the chemical assays, he's super excited. He's been pushing to get drill rigs back out there again and get the next program up and running. And we are working towards that. We're doing some additional work, which I'll talk to at the moment, in order to get the best possible drill targets. But, Neil is obviously, with his geological expertise, he sees some real strong alignment to some of the larger, as in world-class deposits that we see around the world, similar structures and similar settings at Oasis. So we still need to test those, and that's going to be a big program of effort for next year to try and prove that up. But Neil sees huge potential at Oasis. In terms of the market, and I'll probably just flick to the next slide, which is where I do talk about this. I suppose what Neil's seen and saw last year is what I saw when I first started having a look at Greenvale at the beginning of the year when we started speaking. There has been a typical underinvestment in exploration and development of uranium assets. In the context of significant, and I mean, significant probably gets overused, but, unprecedented investment into nuclear energy for the future. And this isn't by utilities operators or nuclear power plant operators. I mean, as the slide says there, we've seen, $11.1 billion US committed by the largest big tech companies in the world over the last 12 months to secure nuclear energy for the future requirement. I made this joke previously, all these companies are hoovering up everyone's information and listening to every phone call and conversation you have every day. So they know what's going on better than the rest of us. And I think we should probably take a bit of a lead. If they're investing that kind of capital to secure nuclear energy, it's going to have a huge part to play in the future. In terms of spot price, the chart there tracks the spot price over the last couple of years. And what we saw in the middle of the year was a bit of a consolidation and a sort of a bottoming out and a reset of the spot price at around sort of 65, low 70 US dollars a pound. We have seen the spot price move. I think it's currently sitting at around $80 a pound. But most analysts are predicting that by the end of this year and into early next year, we'll be back at around $100 a pound. So it's just a fantastic time for us to be progressing our uranium projects with these strong industry tailwinds pushing everything and momentum forward off the back of a rising spot price environment. Just go to the next slide now. So I'll have a quick chat about our asset portfolio. Obviously, we do have quite a broad range of projects, and I'm going to dive into Oasis and Alpha a little bit later on in the slide. So I'll just quickly run over the other projects at a high level. So Milingera and Longreach, the geothermal projects, leases over grounds with significant geothermal potential. The company's previously done some work and had a look at the cost to drill, and geothermal drilling is very expensive, probably not something we're going to invest in by ourselves. So we are having quite a few conversations with potential partners at the moment to see how we might be able to collaborate and unlock some value from the geothermal projects. But we'd probably be looking at someone else to do most of the heavy lifting on that work. In terms of Hedbury and Alkedra, either side of Alice Springs. So we had first field work and boots on the ground at Henbury only a couple of weeks ago. And that was following up some radiometric anomalies that we'd identified from our previous airborne work. We did the same airborne survey across Alkedra and Douglas River, but Henbury was the one we were most interested to go and have a look at. I suppose the results from the field work suggested that there is definitely the need for a follow-up program. And so we've now got to step through that whole permitting and notice of entry process to go and take physical samples, so rock chips, soil samples and the like. That's also the position we're in at Alkedra straight away. We haven't been on the ground, but we do see strong radiometric anomalies linked with and associated with the Alkedra granite. So we know we're going to want to take samples. So we've got to go and step through that sort of land access piece. It is a process that we need to work through in the NT. It does take a bit of time. And I'd be really keen to try and get out in the field this year, but ultimately we'll get out in the field as soon as we've got the notices to do it. We've also got, obviously, some conflicting priorities at the moment, and I can only have the team at one place at one time. Douglas River, look, again, a really interesting project for us, located in the Pine Creek region. It's a world-class uranium district. Our claims are actually contiguous with Petronas Resources, and they host a Thunderball deposit within that area. We've seen huge paleo channels that's kind of linking south to north that would be trending into that area. You know, I don't know the Petronas team very well. I've only met them recently, but, you know, we're really excited by the potential at Douglas River. We haven't been able to get on the ground. We are going through a tribunal process at the moment. It is pretty standard in the NT to step through this tribunal process. It's kind of like the Warden's Court here in WA. So we're expecting probably early next year we'll have the access and we'll be able to start doing some you know, first stage field work. But yeah, the prospectivity of that region really excites us.
I'll just a quick one, Alex, before you go on. That's a deep and broad portfolio, which is fantastic. But how do you go about sort of prioritising and deciding where to deploy your resources with such a big portfolio?
Yeah, I think it's probably my biggest challenge at the moment. You know, as anyone who knows me and obviously knows Neil, we like to keep busy. We like to keep things moving. Creating a high work tempo is something that I think is really important as a junior exploration company. But the key word you said there is prioritise, and ultimately that's now becoming the thing that I'm having to look at. So Asha, our technical consultant who's just started with us, she's actually tasked at the moment to look at all of our projects on the uranium front and conduct a prospectivity analysis across each one of them and then map out next stage, next work. So ultimately, the projects aren't going anywhere in terms of the rocks are where they are and the setting is what it is. So once we've done that body of work, we can then start allocating our resources to where I think we'll get the best return for shareholders from every dollar spent. So at the moment, you know, it's really shaped by what is the most prospective, where do we think we're going to get the best return in either making a discovery or extending known mineralization, trending towards a resource. I'd say, without, you know, second guessing Ash's work, that Oasis at the moment is probably our highest priority, where I'll be putting people and assets to continue to do work, just off the strength of the initial results we've got from this first drill program. If that means that the NT projects push and we get, you know, the next follow-up stages early next year, then so be it. You know, we'll still be able to do that work, but I can't be in two places at the same time. On to Oasis, which I'll give a bit of a deep dive into now. So, I mean, again, I'm not sure who's listening in, but we've obviously acquired the Oasis project early in this year and recently completed our first, as in Greenvale's maiden drilling program. We ran from late July into early September. It's the first time there's been drilling at Oasis in sort of over 15 years and the first sort of larger scale program since the 70s. I mean, from my point of view, I was really happy with the way the program ran in terms of our engagement with the pastoralists, the First Nations. We had a great crew in terms of TerraSearch who provided the on-ground supervision. The drillers were excellent. You know, we ran a very efficient and effective program, stepping through all our HSE and radiation safety management matters without incident. It was really positive. In terms of the results to date, we've only released 2 sets of chemical assays, one for hole 1, which is a great start, a sort of 9-metre intercept at 758 ppm. And then hole 2 released, I think, probably about 2 weeks ago, was excellent. So 8 metres at 2,125 parts per million, including 5 metres at 3,263 ppm. You know, these are fantastic grades. And I know sometimes it's a little bit lost on people of what's a good uranium grade, you know, how does it correlate? Well, ultimately, as with any mining project or mine of the future, grade is king. The higher the grade, the lower the operating cost when you're into production, the higher the margin you make. I also got asked the other day, you know, can you give me a gold equivalent? Everyone's pretty hot on gold right now. And I think, I mean, in a very simple sort of numbers game, you know, 1 gram per tonne is the equivalent to 1 ppm. So you do the maths on 2,000 ppm, and then you can get your equivalent of what that means in terms of value of mineral in the ground that we've got. Another interesting hard rock uranium resource example would probably be the Ranger deposit in the Northern Territory. It has an average grade of 2,800 ppm. So that is, you know, a world-class asset and something to be, you know, conscious of, that when you're talking kind of anything above 2,000 ppm, you are getting into really high-grade territory. I think the other thing that I'd like to highlight with Oasis, and it is fundamental to where we are now and into the future, is the infrastructure advantage. So I've mentioned this a few times to people that we fly into Townsville, we get a hire car, sealed roads, 3-hour drive. We pull up at the Oasis Roadhouse. 5 minutes away from there was where we were drilling. That's where the Oasis deposit is. So everything we need to explore is in place. We've got access to water, fuel, accommodation, camp supplies, telecommunications, and all accessible by sealed road. So it's a huge benefit for us while we're exploring to be able to put all our exploration budget into in-ground work. That's a big point of difference to some of the other explorers you'll see out there who are out in the middle of nowhere. It also means that fast forward into the future and an operating mine, we've already got a direct path to market. So sealed road access all the way into Townsville, deep water port, supplying to a global market. That infrastructure advantage is key when we start looking at the economics of a future mine.
You've got another slide, I think, on Oasis.
Yeah.
Just before you get into that, I was just going to quickly throw one at you because as you were talking there about the infrastructure advantage, it sort of reminded me of the early days of Pilbara when Neil got hold of the Pilgangoora deposit. I don't want to draw too many long bows, but he got hold of that project at a time when a sort of generational opportunity was emerging in the lithium space. And there are some parallels. A deposit that was last drilled in the sort of 60s and 70s, sort of a forgotten project, but it had huge opportunity, and it was really Neil and the team their focus on drilling out Pilgangoora, very aggressively, that led to the success. It was one of the key elements of the success of Pilbara. So just wanted to ask you about the strategy with Oasis. You've had some good results, some very good results from where the known mineralisation is, and you've also had some success regionally with some targets. What are your priorities there? Are you looking at growing that known deposit towards a resource, or are you looking at testing the bigger picture, if you like?
Yeah, and I think the simple answer to that, I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to say we're going to do both, and we're going to do both at the same time. And what I mean there is, so Oasis itself, we know at the moment that all the mineralisation is within the shear zone, and that Oasis shear extends for 1.5 kilometres. We know that, but we've only drill tested 450 metres of strike. So there are natural opportunities to extend the Oasis deposit north and south by chasing that shear zone. That's actually the focus of the work that's happening at the moment. So we've just completed a ground-based, close, high-resolution magnetic survey. That is to understand where the shear zone is tracking undercover. From there, we've got approval to conduct a trenching program, and the magnetics will inform the trenching. The trenching work will be completed, and that's to allow us to then also track and really get a good understanding of, is that mineralisation continuing along in the shear zone? If the answer is yes and yes, then we've got our next set of drill targets, which will be immediately north and south of the Oasis deposit that we've just drilled. So that work is happening right now, and to me, that is the priority in terms of value for money. Following up a known high-grade set of drilling results with extension drilling is the best thing to do. In terms of the regional targets, it's a really interesting opportunity for us because we're seeing radiometric anomalies correlating with structure and control and the right geological settings to have more Oasis deposits within our tenement claim. But that's all we know at the moment. So all of those regional targets have never really been tested thoroughly. So the opportunity that presents for us is to do essentially very early stage grassroots target development in the regional targets at the same time that we're extending the known limits of Oasis. So yeah, I think, and this is where I go back to that point around overall priorities. To me, those two things are the most compelling things for me to be following up and investing in right now. If that means that Henbury, El Kedra and Douglas River have to be parked for 3-4 months because I'm focusing on that work, then to me, that's a logical decision to make. And that, again, the best thing for shareholders in terms of where we're putting their money to work.
Thanks, Alex. I might just, there is a question that's just popped up online which goes to this exact point, so we may as well deal with it now. And I know you've sort of partly answered this, but the question is really, why is it better to focus on, say Queensland, this investor says less well-known uranium areas now as opposed to the NT, where obviously there's a different legislative regulatory regime, and it's probably better known for its uranium deposits?
Well, I think there's probably two parts to that one. And in terms of uranium deposits, I just think they're probably not really well known about in terms of Queensland. So there's multiple deposits in Queensland, Ben Lomond, Maureen, Valhalla. There is quite an active group of uranium explorers operating in Queensland at the moment. I know this. I was on a call last week with a whole bunch of them with AMEC, and we were having a sort of an introductory call talking to the resource minister's one of his chief policy advisors, particularly about uranium and where we see the uranium landscape in Queensland moving forward. That policy debate on the exploration and mining of uranium in Queensland is something that we are all actively pushing on. And I think, the early stages from the conversation have all been very positive. To be honest, I couldn't believe the number of shareholders up in the Gold Coast who came up to me and said, uranium is the way of the future. Nuclear energy is what we need. And when I say we mean the globe, not necessarily Australia. But Queensland especially needs to look at how it's dealing with its economy. They've put a ban on and an end to coal mining. There's a huge market in terms of workforce and job opportunities that are needed to backfill that industry. And uranium is seen very clearly as an opportunity to reinforce the resources sector and put that skilled labour to work. So in terms of the NT, look, again, there's quite a number of resources, existing resources in the NT, both the areas where we're operating, kind of either side of Alice Springs and also in Douglas River. The Ranger deposit, which I referenced, world-class deposit. Unfortunately, it's in National Park, so it's not going anywhere. Doesn't mean it's not a great asset, but it's just not going to be unlocked. And I think this goes to the Douglas River piece, where it is a great region, but there are a lot of heritage and cultural considerations that need to be stepped through. And this is exactly what we're working through with this tribunal process at the moment. So I think one of the benefits is, though, once you've stepped through this environment, you've had your negotiations and you've been granted access, then you can move on. Look, not throwing stones, but I wouldn't want to be doing this in WA at the moment because the landscape in WA has changed. You can step through all the process and then the rug can be pulled out from underneath your feet. So, yeah, we won't be investing in uranium exploration in WA anytime soon. But we do see a lot of government support and general understanding that it is the way forward and an opportunity, particularly for the Queensland people and particularly for far north Queensland.
Interesting. Yeah.
We've kind of jumped off the point now, but onto Oasis. I wanted to, I spoke to some of our results. I really want to highlight, I'm hoping this comes through on the screen, this sort of little ellipse here. They're the only chemical assays that we've released to market so far from our drill program. So hole 1, hole 2. What we have yet to follow is holes 3 through to 12. So, over 80% of our drilling program still hasn't been announced to market. And I think it's just worth noting that hole 1 was good, hole 2 was exceptional. There's still a whole lot more information that will come out to market over the next probably, the way things are going, I would say, through October into November, probably into early December, it is a bit of a long, slow process to get the material from site into Townsville, logged, prepped, sampled, prepared, into Intertech, down to Adelaide, through the lab, results back to us. So, it's nothing we can do to speed that up, but still plenty of more information and the full, results from Oasis to follow the market. But go on to the next one, Alpha Torbanite project. You mentioned this, Nick. It's been with the company for quite some time. It's a really interesting project. So I think if most people are aware of that Lassonde curve in terms of, you make a discovery and everyone gets excited and then you actually get into the hard grinding work of development studies and then your news flow really drops off and people sort of start to lose interest. I think that's where alpha sits, and that's why I'd go back to the pivot into uranium from an exploration point of view. It was a great move by Neil kind of 18 months ago, because we need to have a reason as a pre-revenue company to be getting up, looking to invest, to make discoveries and grow a resource base. It doesn't mean that the work on alpha isn't still happening in the background, but as most shareholders are probably aware, it doesn't generate a lot of news flow. I've not pulled any punches on this. The current test work program is late. I'm not going to put an announcement out to the market to say, by the way, nothing's happened in the last 6 weeks, because everything's behind schedule. But as soon as we do achieve the milestones, we will be letting everyone know what's going on. In terms of sort of general update, as I mentioned, we've got an existing resource. We don't need to drill out that. We don't need to drill that out at the moment. The liquefaction test work that has been completed to date has demonstrated clearly the ability to make an asphalt product, asphaltene, from alpha's torbanite. Asphaltene can then be processed to make bitumen. Test program 7 had a single aim and a single outcome of deriving a bulk sample that can then be certified and modified and then certified to meet that C170 spec. So the key thing to me, and I keep being asked, is are we going to be finished by December? I don't care if we're finished by December. What I need to do is make sure we meet that key requirement of generating a bulk sample of sufficient quantity that can then go and be tested. I've gone through with our process engineer. We've reread all the test work programs that have been completed to date. And there's a consistent comment that comes from Technics, the bitumen advisor, to say, you must give us a larger sample. We need at least 1 litre. You're sending us 100 millilitres. We can't do the test work. So achieving the bulk sample quantity is actually a fundamental thing to achieve here. If that means it takes a little bit longer because Monash have got to do more test work runs, then that's what we'll do. In terms of the program to date, and by way of update that I only received today, the induction heater, which we've all been waiting for, has been built. Cheers and high fives all around. That will be delivered to Monash this Friday for them to then start their installation and commissioning. So the commissioning is really around managing safety protocols. And again, anyone who's listening has ever run pressure vessels at sort of 400 degrees Celsius, you need to step through this very carefully. And that's exactly what they're doing. So as soon as the installation and commissioning is completed, then we're ready to start doing the test runs and produce the bulk sample. So that will be something we'll put out to market. I think it's also worth noting, though, we have already learnt a few key things from the program so far. So Monash were able to do some test runs testing toluene and THF as the carrier for liquefaction with their existing autoclave. And what they found when they scaled up from test work program 6, which was 100 mil autoclave to a 4 litre autoclave, which Monash have, the THF broke down completely and so was absolutely unusable as a carrier for liquefying the torbanite. So we already know something. So toluene will be the basis of what we use going forward. And our initial test runs are going to be utilising zinc as a catalyst, and that was what achieved the best results from test program 6. So again, I can only apologise to shareholders that want to see more information and more news out to the market. That's where I think forums like this are the best way to look at it, because we can just have a discussion and advise people of what's going on, but we don't really have enough content to put an ASX announcement out. So yeah, it's Alpha's got significant potential and is a real strategic asset. Another thing that we have started doing is talking to potential industry partners. I can't say who they are, but they're people that are obviously active in the bitumen supply, distribution and utilisation space. And I think, to me, it's a really important thing to start early engagement, partnering, collaborating, getting people involved who are end users of this product as early as possible, to me, is the best way to move forward.
That's interesting, Alex. So just a quick one before you sort of wrap up on the Alpha project. I think a lot of shareholders understand the potential of the asset. It was an exciting story, the potential to become Australia's only domestic source of bitumen. The key issue with the project obviously has been the delays that you've experienced with some of these third-party laboratories, given the very specialised nature of the deposit. I suppose the simple question is what are you doing? What can you do to overcome some of those delays and to move it forward? Given it is so specialised, and are there any other alternative pathways where you could work with, I suppose, more commercially minded partners in the space?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, so one of the things we're doing at the moment, so Technics, who have been involved with the project for a while, they're the bitumen specialist based out of New Zealand. We've actually brought them into the fold with us now. So their previous scope was, we're going to give you a sample, can you certify it? We're going through the negotiations at the moment to say, we're going to give you Monash's product, and we want you to treat that as an intermediary, and we'd like you to provide some of your expertise to then refine, modify, and get this product to the C170 spec. Again, kind of an offhand comment by them. They said, why are you only chasing C170? We think we could probably get better. And I said, let's walk before we run. And we've said we're going to chase the C170 spec first. Once we've done that, then we can look at other opportunities. And I suppose the interesting thing, though, is the reason they put this forward is as you get higher in specification, obviously the price increases. I've had a few people say, well, what would you need? What would you be doing it for? What's the application? So C170 is obviously for roads, but they're talking about higher grade, higher specialty products that are used on the likes of airport runways. So where you need much more dynamic environments for a bitumen product. So that's something that we're quite interested to explore. But again, we're focused on C170, get that certification through and move on. I think Technics had previously been sort of at arm's length, but bringing that expertise in-house is one of those things we're doing to making sure we're getting the right minds and industry experts involved. It also ties to that second piece that I mentioned around starting to talk to some end users. So, some of the groups we're talking to have this processing capability at the moment. They also have their own certification capabilities. So getting their know-how and getting their involvement, someone who's worked in bitumen and supply delivery and production for the last 25, 30 years, getting them in part of the conversation and potentially some level of ownership and success of the project, to me, is how we're going to move that forward. I think, we're best served by getting more heads involved and invested in the project to take it forward, rather than keeping everyone at arm's length and just trying to do it ourselves.
Cool. We've got quite a few questions, so do you want to just give your wrap-up pitch, and then we'll get into the question time?
Oh, look, I think we could probably just go straight into question time. I think from a wrap-up pitch perspective, it's been a pretty busy 4.5 months. We're going to stay busy through to the end of the year and roll straight into the next year. We've got a lot of opportunities, a lot of work that we can do across our whole portfolio of projects. And I think that's probably the thing. I've probably been a bit overexcited by pushing out, like, we're going to be in the field at Henbury in the next 2 weeks. We're going to get into our Kedra before the end of the year. I probably take a step back on that now and say, well, I literally can't have my teams in 2 places at the same time. And I can't flip-flop from Queensland to the NT 1 week after the next. Because one of the things that's really important to me and the way we want to run our exploration programs is to make sure we do the planning and the due diligence in the office before we get into the field. So that planning time to make sure that when we actually are committing resources into the field, again, as soon as we're in the field, everything's more expensive. As soon as we're drilling, we're burning more cash than anything else we do. So I want to make sure that when we are committing to field work, it's done with the best level of planning and rigor to make sure that the field work has the best chance of success. Obviously, exploration is inherently risky, but if we can de-risk that in our planning, and if that comes at the expense of time, then that's okay. We're never sitting on our hands doing nothing. It'll be a case if we're not in the field, we're planning the next stage of field work. But yeah, I think that's how the next sort of 6 to 12 months are going to run for us. I've got a point there around strategic business development opportunities. Again, not too much I can say about that. We are talking to a number of groups under NDA, looking at again, other opportunities that we can do. All uranium focused at the moment.
Excellent. Well, let's get into some questions, Alex.
Sure.
I'll just fire these off and we'll try and deal with them quickly. And apologies if there's a little bit of overlap with what you've covered, but I do want to sort of try and give everyone a voice here. An email question first. What is the timeline for Test Program 7's completion? Has the procurement and installation of the heating systems completed yet? I think you've touched on that. And if not, when can we expect it to be completed and for you to actually start generating bulk samples?
Yeah, so I think as discussed, covered a bit, the procurement has been completed. The installation will start, well, it'll be delivered at the end of this week. So the installation and commissioning will start next week. In terms of a timeline for installation is a couple of days. Commissioning, I haven't got a firm line on Monash from that. I might add an extra couple of days on whatever timeline they give me. But I would expect that we should be ready to start producing sample material by the end of October. It puts us about 6 weeks behind on the original contract. And that's a conversation that we're having sort of offline with Monash on how we manage that. But I'd go to, in terms of when it's finished, again, the scope, or my scope, and what I'm trying to achieve from this program has broadened a little bit. So Technics will be involved in the final processing and then the certification of the material. The Technics team are not available until the middle of January at the earliest. So it's definitely not finished by the end of the year because, again, as I've said, that's an arbitrary date. It's finished when we've produced sufficient bulk sample and Technics have done what they need to do, and then we've got the certification. So I would expect probably, ballpark kind of end of Q1 next year would be when we'd have a bit of paper that says, here's your certification standard.
Okay, great. Another couple of alpha questions. With C170 being a focus at alpha, is there scope for different and or higher grade bitumen specs, and what might that mean for developing the project? I think you did touch on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I again, I don't want to get too excited and look at, running off down a different pathway. I want to commit to delivering, the C170 and road base application has always been the basis of where this project generated its value. If there is an ability to make additional and or higher value products, then that's the next phase of test work that we would look at. And I think, I'll take some licensing and ability to go from my point of view, having started with here, only a couple of months ago, I'm going to step through this in the logical, progressive manner that you would normally do it. So first thing after we achieve C170 spec is to wrap a scoping study around the project and understand its economics. A scoping study would also look at optionality that can be achieved from the final product. So you do that first. Then you go on to a PFS, then you go into a DFS. The whole point being that you start with a broad focus and remit and class of engineering estimate, and then tighten that down into a bankable feasibility study that you can go and place orders against. Usually when you shoot for the DFS first, you miss a few things. And I think that, we could probably agree that is probably what's happened here.
Mm. And just one other one, other than sample size, what technical requirements or problems need to be solved to meet C170, and how solvable do you think these are?
So one of the key things that came from Test Program 6, and this is where the induction heater has come from, is the ability to reach 400 degrees at the prescribed temperature rate was fundamental into the quality of the product that was produced, and also the recovery. So the induction heater has been around, Monash used to take about 8 hours to go from room temperature to 400 degrees Celsius. The new induction heater will do that in about an hour. So that much faster temperature rise is a key learning from Test Program 6 in order to give you the right product material that obviously then goes on to the next stage of processing. Penetration and viscosity has always been the key thing in terms of the C170 spec, and that's where Technics come into it. So I'm going to put my hand up and say Technics have essentially a multi-stage process that is a bit of a black box. But they're saying, you give us this input, we'll give you that output. And at the moment, I'm confident, given their sort of industry leading and extensive experience in this space, that's the best way for us to go forward. Locking down that scope in terms of what Monash will provide and what we will give as an input is a fundamental thing we're working on at the moment.
Thanks, Alex. Let's jump back to Oasis and uranium. There was an email question asking that the question is, did the drilling program at Oasis include any additional holes to test the mineralisation? We got some hints from Neil in a recent article from Christy Batten that you were going to include 3 or 4 additional holes. Did that in fact happen?
Yeah, so I suppose every drill hole was testing mineralisation. Every drill hole that we know to date hit uranium mineralisation. The original program was holes 1 to 10, and holes 11 and 12 were those additional holes, so deeper targets to the north, and that was really off the back of what we saw from hole 3, which had a kind of intercept 280 metres from vertical depth from surface, and we're really interested to see, does that depth extension extend to the north? So I haven't got the assay results from that yet. I don't even have the gamma probe results from that yet. But from the logging perspective, yeah, we did hit mineralisation again. What's the grade? Waiting to see. So yes, extra holes were drilled. Not a heap, but 2 very strategic holes in order to test depth extension to the north.
Excellent. Just a couple more to wrap us up. The Petronas, the Resources have recently announced some results from their Thunderball deposit, and I think they've just finished a diamond drilling program. They were waiting for results from that. Which project is that closest to in your package, and when do you expect to get on the ground? I just raise that because there's not a lot of people drilling for uranium around Australia these days, so it could be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
No, absolutely. And I mean, if shareholders hadn't tracked it, but probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, we actually put an update out where we expanded our Douglas River project, almost 100% increase in terms of total land package. Now, 3 of the 4 of those claims are under application, so we can't get on the ground yet. But the northernmost claim is actually contiguous with Petronas's tenement boundary, the same one that hosts the Thunderball deposit. So I think from a distance perspective to Thunderball, it's about 5 or 6 kilometres. But again, our tenement boundary abuts theirs. So yeah, really interesting. I only met the Petronas team at the Gold Coast conference a few weeks ago. I hadn't known them until then. I know that their chairman, Rowan, he's known Neil for quite some time. So, there's been a few discussions there. Yeah, really interested to see the results and what they do. To me, it adds more weight and value to what we've seen in terms of the prospectivity of the Douglas River project. That land access piece is again something we've been working on at the moment. So, as soon as we can get boots on the ground in the NT and I've got the right gap and to allocate the resources to it, we'll be into it. Obviously, having lived in Darwin for a few years, you do have the wet season to deal with. So typically, December, January into early February kind of off limits for anything in the field. But as soon as the weather lifts, then, and we've got the approval, we'll be up there seeing what we can get into.
And just one final one, Alex, your last point there about strategic business development. So the company's made no secret of the fact that your long-term plan is to aggregate uranium resources, be it through exploration or possible M&A. Can you tell us what sort of projects you're looking for, and can you tell us where?
Yep. So what we're looking for, and I've actually put a few things to Neil that came through, pretty low cost, early stage opportunities that had some promise. And it was a hard no. So Neil and the board are focused on, if we're looking at other assets, they are to be more advanced than what we already have. So acquiring projects with existing resources, ideally something that is close to being a mine of the future as possible. What we do, we particularly with Asher involved and the board and my own experience, we are well versed in exploration. So we're happy to take a little bit of exploration risk to take something that maybe needs a bit more work and a bit of resource growth drilling, commit to that work to buy something and sort of, give it a resource upgrade in kind of 12, 18 months to get it over the line in terms of total quantity. In terms of jurisdictions, we are looking in Australia and also offshore, but by offshore, really only the US. We do see the US as being a really good place for any mineral commodity at the moment. But given the US is the largest consumer of uranium globally and a net importer of uranium, again, we see some real opportunity there if we can secure the right asset. But it would be something that is, for me, with near-term production potential, and it would be a real step change for the company to go from kind of pre-resource early explorer to, near-term producer with a resource that's, mineable today. That's what I'm after. Got a few in the crosshairs, and we'll see how the next few weeks play out.
Interesting. Yeah, the US has been a happy hunting ground for ASX listed companies of late, so we'll watch this space with interest.
Yeah.
Alex, maybe just to wrap up, I think we've covered all the questions. Maybe just quickly talk to how shareholders can stay in touch with the story. Greenvale is on the Investor Hub service. What's the best way for people to keep up to date?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've mentioned this a few times, but the company migrated everything onto Investor Hub probably about 6 or 9 months ago now. And we're doing a lot to map across our registry details to get everyone onto there. So if you're registered on Investor Hub, then you'll get every announcement we put out, every bit of sort of news or media or interesting articles that we put onto our website will get pushed out to shareholders as well. So that really is the best way to do it. I've also said, quite literally, and people have taken me on my word, email us at the admin email address, and that'll come straight to me, and I guarantee you'll get a reply. I've seen a few people sort of echo that on Hot Copper and go, "Oh, he actually did reply." And I went, "Yep, I follow through on what I say." So if you want to keep up to date, then yeah, Investor Hub. We've also got we use our LinkedIn and X profiles just to redistribute information and interesting industry articles and sentiment that's going around. So relatively active on social media, but they're the main channels. And if you're not getting anything, then reach out and we can add you to the list. If you can't navigate your way through Investor Hub, we can manually put someone's details into it. So, yeah, always happy to hear from shareholders. We want to field their questions. We want to know what's important to them. We think we're pushing things the right way, but it's always good to get everyone's perspective.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. Look, that was a great update. Really appreciate it. Excellent presentation and good to chat to you. So thanks for joining us, and thank you to everyone who tuned in this morning. And just a reminder that everyone who registered will receive an email with a recording, and we'll release this on YouTube later today and also post it on all the company socials. You might even get an email through Investor Hub. Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Pleasure. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, everyone, for listening. Cheers.